Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the co-owner and creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video I want to talk to you a little bit about if the fearful avoidant attachment style individual ever experiences loneliness, and if so, what are the big root causes or core wounds around it, and what can we sort of start to do about it. If you've seen the previous video, I made a video about like the actual loneliness epidemic that's occurring and some of the root reasons for it. And these included things like being disconnected from self, having a lot of fears about relationships that cause us to not want to go in that direction or not open up fully or not do things that empower us in our relationship dynamics, having stored subconscious shame. So we hide parts of ourselves when we go into our interactions, which ultimately creates a lack of fulfillment and meaning in our relationships, and also really sets the stage for having feelings of being conditionally loved, since we're conditionally loving ourselves and thus only showing parts of ourselves. Having hurt and painful behaviors we've adapted that can create invisible walls to connection. This includes things like, being suspicious in relationships. And so, if we're in a state of suspicion, we're obviously not like being present and connecting in the same way. And this doesn't mean don't be cautious, but it means if we're bringing in these dynamics of just consistent suspicion, that creates a barrier to connection ultimately. And then having a competition-based mindset. Which basically involves a lot of comparison and things like that. So what I want to talk about in this video is like specifically which of those core root causes impact the fearful avoidant. And I want to sort of layer in another really important component here. Before I dive in, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. It sure helps me and supports me a lot, and helps me to continuously create these daily videos here for you guys. And then also we're doing a sale for our community. The coupon code is with you. It's all one word, and it's for 25% off our all access pass, which basically gives you access to all of our courses, all of our previous webinars, and our 4 live webinars I do with our members each week that answer personal questions and things like that. So let's talk about this for a second. So what creates loneliness for a fearful avoidant the most? Well, number one, there can be a huge component of disconnection from self. But where I find, or how I find this manifests the most for the fearful avoidant, is that they can be quite good at connecting to themselves when they're alone, but they disconnect from themselves the moment they're around others. And this ultimately makes relationships feel unfulfilling. It doesn't make them feel like there's a two-way street or a two-way exchange. Now, when we talked in that original video about loneliness, one of the biggest things that's so important to recognize is that loneliness for anybody is not about like if we have people in our lives or not. It's about the quality of our connections. It's about the depth. It's about the meaning. It's about the feelings of belonging. It's about how much we feel seen, heard, understood by somebody else. And what I found when I created this course around this and did a whole bunch of research is that there's ultimately those 5 key barriers that create the lack of belonging. So for example, if I don't know what my needs are from people, and I don't know what needs I want in a relationship, like what other qualities or traits or, incentives or morals or values I want other people to have, then I might just find myself in a community of people who don't actually bring me my needs. So for example, like let's say for myself, I'm huge into obviously personal growth and emotional connection. And maybe if I don't know that because I haven't done that introspective work, maybe I end up like in an art class with people who value creativity more. And I value creativity too, but it's not like the thing for me, right? It's not like the stuff that like really drives me and inspires me and like gets me up in the morning that I can't wait to do. And so it can create that barrier to like true deep connection, or just like a little bit of lack of fulfillment. And obviously, I like creativity enough where that could still be cool and I could still connect with people. What if there's a huge disparity? What if it's like you want emotional connection and you're around a whole bunch of people who just want to talk about facts and theories and not about emotions and feelings and behaviors at all, right? Then it can be totally different. So part of like what we have to know is know ourselves. But for the fearful avoidant, what I find is that they often do know themselves, but they abandon themselves the moment they're around people. Why? Because that coping mechanism of hypervigilance comes up and makes them hyper-focused on everybody else, and also creates like out of an adaptation. And I'm just in the process of taking a certification course and I've done a lot of like studying and reading about this, but I'm doing an actual certification course so I can use some of this content. But it's about Myers-Briggs type indicator, like your MBTI, and typology, like your personality. And it's really interesting because what I find is that like a lot of fearful avoidance don't like have an extroverted feeling sense where it's not dominant for them. So they're not like super like in depth with like being hyper vigilant. It's not like their natural space of functioning to be super hyper focused on what everybody's feeling around them, but it's something that is very available to them. And so sometimes they can be in a space where they're like hyper focused on everybody else, but it's sort of like it's like writing your name with like your right hand versus your left hand. And while you can do both, one takes a little more energy and takes a little more out of you. And sometimes fearful avoidants like go into a space that's not as natural for them, though it can be. This isn't every fearful avoidant, but it's a lot of fearful avoidance. And they go into this space of like being hyper vigilant and so focused on everybody outside of them. But usually they have different functions that dominate how they perceive and integrate information and respond to information that come more naturally and more easily, and it takes them out of that relationship to themselves. So that's a whole kind of separate topic. But what you see basically at the root there is that fearful avoidants can have this dynamic where they abandon themselves, and then they get into relationships where they feel unfulfilling because they feel like they're seeing, hearing, understanding somebody else to the nth degree. In fact, even trying to mind read a little bit to stay safe and to know what's going on and to have clarity and transparency and feel kind of in control when they usually have some wounds around that. But then they're not expressing themselves. They're not showing up and saying, hey, this is what I need. This is what I feel. This is what I'm experiencing, which for a lot of fearful avoidants makes their relationships exhausting. And then they feel disempowered, and then often they push people away as a means to try to like just rebalance themselves after a lot of relationship and emotional interaction. And this occurs for like extroverted and introverted fearful avoidance. So it's a really interesting dynamic. And then another thing that we see a lot as well is the shame pieces. Like a lot of fearful avoidants play this game with themselves, which is like, I will be worthy when, like, once I've done this thing or achieved that or have this career or have this many kids or have a husband or a wife, or then I'll be worthy of connection and community. Then I can, and it's like saying, it's like you're trying to do things from the outside in, and you rob yourself of things that you really want or value in life. And maybe you don't bring all of yourself to the table or truly show yourself because you feel like parts of you are shameful, when in fact, most of the things that we shame ourselves for as a species are not very shameful. And most other people can sometimes find endearing or sweet. And do you really want to be around people in the first place who are like shaming you for like not having a house yet or not having kids yet? Like if you go into your relationship dynamics in that space with that mindset or mentality, which like I have a very good friend who does this, who I was speaking to the other day, who's fearful avoidant. It's like so limiting and it just separates you so much from people. Then of course you're going to feel loneliness. So it's really putting an end to those cycles as well. Okay. So the shaming, the disconnection from self the moment you're around people. Sometimes the hurts or fears can create these strategies to keep people at bay, to not open up too much, to be very suspicious, which all these things act as barriers to connection and slow our ability to feel like the quality of our relationships are very profound or fulfilling. And then the competitive mindset fearful avoidance can have in some degrees, but I see they tend to be much more like embrace each other mindset first. So it doesn't tend to show up as much, although it can for certain individuals, especially those individuals who tend to value like power to quite a strong degree, which can be an adaptation for certain fearful avoidance. So I would say those are sort of the encompassing pieces there. And something that's so important to just be aware of and dive into if you are the fearful avoidant is just the recognition that you deserve to start connecting as who you are now. The ability to isolate the pieces of yourself that you do shame and you do make unworthy of love, and to change your associations to that, to really question those stories and pieces of meaning you're giving to that situation that keep you hiding yourself. Because again, as a fearful avoidant who usually has a good capacity to sort of unconditionally love or to really be accepting of others and their flaws and faults, it's not very fair to you that you don't do that for yourself and then bring that to the table and hope that others will do it. And it will ultimately create a lower quality of connection because you feel like you're only being loved based on conditions because you've set out those conditions for yourself, and you're exiling parts of yourself from being seen in relationships accordingly, which block you from fully and truly receiving love. And then again, that huge piece for fearful avoidance about not connecting to self and being in touch with your own feelings and needs in real time when you're around other people. And that can create exhaustion in relationships, tiredness. That hypervigilance can be a little taxing. It can put you into sympathetic nervous system mode and get you in fight or flight a little bit too when you're around people, feeling like you always have to be on. And all of those things are huge barriers to connection. So there are things that you want to isolate, have a strategy for reprogramming around that you can rinse and repeat repetitively and elicits an emotional response, and then really work to push in those new patterns of behavior and show up for them consistently so that you change the paradigm and you fired and wired new neural pathways that get reinforced at the subconscious level while those old patterns and pathways get to atrophy over time. So I hope that all makes sense. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you're getting lots of value out of this channel, and I will see you in the next video.